Good morning. Just down here in the Isle of Wight Undercliff. Undercliff Drive. This is a little diverted section. This was an A road, believe it or not. But then there was a big landslip and it all slipped away. The A road is no longer an A road, it's now cut off. Two sections were destroyed of the road, the carriageway, and it was not technically feasible or economic to repair it and put it all back together again. So it's been left disassembled, you could say, by nature. And this is a deer-free Isle of Wight. Largely, there's a few deer. Don't know if they're increasing in numbers, but there's a few out in the wild. And you can see what a thicket we got here. Now, if this was the mainland, you would not have a thicket like this in this kind of context, completely open, because it would be browsed out by deer. Look at the thickness of this. I'm sure there are one or two deer out here in the Undercliff. But the structure of these kind of secondary woodland areas are totally different here. It's quite open, bright woodland as well, which helps. But that's because it's so dynamic. But yeah, I can guarantee if this was part of the mainland, it would not be this dense throughout. I don't know if deer browse Budlear, which is what a lot of this is. There's more natural woodland as we go further down, which is coming into St Lawrence. Large gardens. This is the A road, as was. So the carriageway used to carry on in that direction, but now there's a temporary bit off to the right. Yeah, so it's an interesting ecological conundrum, because on the one hand you have mesoherbivore release, well, a combination of that and invasive deer species. So in the UK, because we don't have the predators, arguably the deer populations are a lot higher because of that. I mean, they're a lot higher, full stop, but arguably it's partly because of mesoherbivore release, which means the top-down regulation provided by wolves and lynx and that kind of thing has vanished, because humans have killed wolves and lynx in the UK. Therefore the deer population has proliferated. Combine that with subsidisation, which I think is probably a key factor in having a lot of deer, in that farmland provides really good grazing and browsing habitat for deer, so there's lots and lots of food, an overwhelming amount of food for deer, and they browse it and graze it all off. And then thirdly is additional species of deer, the non-natives, the muntjacs and Chinese water deer and other stuff. You combine all those different attributes or factors and you have a overabundant deer population on the mainland, which is browsing and grazing out woodlands and shrublands, and under the canopy of trees in woodlands, any little seedling is just browsed off. So you're not really getting the new age classes of canopy trees growing up through. So basically those woodlands are corpses, basically. They're the standing dead or the living dead, because they'll only last as long as the canopy trees last, the big old adults, because there's no regeneration underneath. So come back in 100 years and they may well not be woodland anymore, unless we can resolve the overabundant deer issue. But on the Isle of Wight, there are no deer, effectively. They're ecologically extinct. It's quite interesting, these houses were abandoned along here, sadly, when the landslip occurred. And it's all the vegetation is growing up. Mini Chernobyl. Yeah. Strange how they're just left to basically be overwhelmed by vegetation. But you can see how dense the understory is through here. Pretty amazing. So, some interesting ecological impacts of no deer at all here, like I was saying, you've got two contrasting scenarios. On the mainland you've got too many deer, so meso-herbivore release, whereas on the Isle of Wight you've got the opposite, which is no deer. They're two extremes and neither situation is good, but ecologists on the Isle of Wight, or botanists I think primarily, argue that the lack of deer on the Isle of Wight is the way it should be, and it should be kept that way. And they argue that for interesting reasons, some of which are good, some of which are blinkered and siloed, I think. So we've got a few rarities, can't think of what they are, plant rarities that will be grazed if you have deer here. But, you know, they're rarities in the UK, but in European mainlands they're not as rare, and they do survive quite happily with browsing and grazing deer. But the thing is, meso-herbivore release. So if you did have deer on the island, they would proliferate just as they do on the mainland, and you go to the opposite problem, from no deer at all to a overabundant deer population. So what do? What you do at the moment is you maintain it as a deer-free island, but you do lots and lots of thinking and planning for the reintroduction of a small, tightly regulated population of deer. That's one argument. Trouble is, the Isle of Wight is too small to support a viable population of the predators. So I think I'm probably right in saying that the Isle of Wight alone could not support a viable population of lynx. I might be wrong there. If you're an ecologist and you have ideas around that, provide comments in the comments section. It's basically the inside of the M25, so Greater London kind of scale. Salisbury Plain Training Area scale. What's that, 40,000 hectares? I think that's roughly how big the Isle of Wight is. I'll have to check that. But is that big enough to support more than, a pair of lynx? And do they really operate in pairs, or have you got territorial females and then males that are less territorial? I don't know, to be honest. I think that's how it works with tigers. Not sure about lynx. I need to do some research. But so the point being, I don't think you could reinstate top-down regulation of deer populations on the Isle of Wight through natural processes. You'd have to restore it through humans culling the deer. No, I'm quite relaxed about that. I think harvesting venison would be a good thing. Nice sustainable source of food. Whether you could get your stalkers to actually do it in an ecologically sensible way, rather than just targeting prize antler-bearing animals, I don't know. I don't know anything about that, as you can tell, probably. But yeah, it's worth thinking about. Now, ecologically on the island, you've got those rare flower or rare plants that the botanists are concerned will be overgrazed and overbrowsed. Or in terms of birds, it's quite difficult to argue either way, to be honest. So you might expect there to be a lot of nightingales and turtle doves and kind of shrubby, scrubby dependent species on the island because of the lack of deer, and they're very dense woodlands and open shrubland habitats that regenerate very readily, but we haven't got them. So I think nightingale is probably up to about 10 pairs, I suppose. I might be overestimating. And turtle dove is basically extinct. There's normally one or two knocking around in summer, and they certainly pass through on migration still. But despite the seeming thickness of the scrubby habitat we have here, because of the lack of browsing by deer, we don't have the nightingales and we don't have the turtle doves. Very odd. Probably because for turtle doves there's a lack of summer food resources, seed-rich habitat. For nightingales, I don't know. It's probably a broader process. Our nightingales may depend. I don't know. I was going to say they may depend on there being a more robust regional population, but I don't know. Intriguing. So yeah, lack of deer. So just on the mainland and the whole top-down regulation debate, it's an interesting one. So some conservation kind of advocates or predator reintroduction advocates say that lynx, if you reintroduce them, will have a regulating effect on the deer population. I think that's probably true in some areas, and it probably isn't true on the whole. So locally, where you've got a lynx territory and you've got a male and a female lynx knocking around in what would be a big territory, they probably will have some regulatory effect, but those territories will be few and far between, I think, in the UK. So you get a territory over there, then 10 kilometres away you may get another territory in larger blocks of good habitat that are fairly secluded and quiet, because that's really what lynx like. They like skulking away, never to be seen again sort of thing. But all those gaps in between those territories, there's going to be very light predator pressure from lynx. I would suggest, I'm not a lynx ecologist by any means, so I'm just debating it here. So I suspect on the whole, the deer population won't really be affected that much by lynx. Now if the whole landscape of fear thing starts to operate where, the deer become a lot more cautious than they are currently because they know there are lynx in the region, if that starts to affect the movements and the boldness of deer, so they become more skittish and less confident, that may ultimately lead to a decline in the population overall. And if it's socially transmitted, if they learn from each other to be paranoid, for want of a better word, then that effect may extend beyond where they're actually lynx. So landscape of fear might operate more broadly than just the lynx territories if it is transmitted beyond where the risk actually is. If that makes any sense at all. Right, almost back to the car. So yeah, I think the whole top-down effects of predator notion probably will be quite diffuse and not particularly strong in the UK. But none of which is to say we shouldn't reintroduce lynx. We absolutely will, or we should, we must. And I think we will reintroduce lynx. Just need to find a very big, relatively quiet block of habitat like Kilda Forest. Stick some in there, and probably 2 or 3 similar places, and then let them work out where they want to go from there. Redwing calling up there somewhere. Don't really get that many redwing in the Undercliff, so it's quite nice. How's the time going now? 8:21 AM. Cafe doesn't open until 9, so I've got plenty of time. Lost my train of thought there. Did we move on from lynx? Can't remember. But yeah, we should definitely reintroduce them. Oh yeah, that's what I was saying. Into 3 or 4 big blocks of prime habitat distributed across the UK, Scotland, England, and then they will work their way out. And they can tell us to what extent they'll use human transformed landscapes. Will they make it to places like the New Forest and the Weald in Sussex? You never know is the way I look at it. But I don't think you should try putting them in those places. You should wait to see if they reach those places. Be well worth somebody doing or looking into road network density and road traffic flow data in the UK and comparing those data with similar data from the European mainland where there are lynx. Just trying to work out, or just trying to create a model of collision risk and kill rates on roads, because that's going to be one of the big risks. Two big risks really. One is to lynx, one is being killed on roads, and the other one is being killed by gamekeepers. But in terms of roads, which is less easy to resolve, or less expensive to resolve, yeah, I think A roads and motorways are going to be death zones for lynx as they are on the European mainland, which doesn't mean you can't have a viable population of lynx where there's a reasonable density of those bigger roads, or that needs to be tested by somebody. But yeah, I think it's true that Iberian lynx, one of their key problems is roadkill. They cross roads and they get run over. Might be slightly different with European lynx or Eurasian lynx, because they're more of a forest, semi-open woodland species, whereas Iberian lynx I think is more of an open shrubland grassland species, because Iberian lynx are primarily hunting rabbits, which live out in the open at highest density anyway. Well, the birdsong has eased off now, so I think it's time get back to the car and head into Ventnor. What a lovely morning though. It's a real microclimate down here. Down here. Sounds like I'm back in London. Lovely still conditions, lovely and sheltered. If you get a northerly wind, you don't feel it down here because the cliff over there protects this low shelf, this undercliff, from those northerlies. And if it gets sunny here in winter, so if you've got a northerly and clear skies, which you often do have on a northerly, then and an easterly, then the sun comes out and it warms up and it becomes really warm. And the lizards come out, the wall lizards, especially around Ventnor. Blooming marvellous. Somebody's been cutting the ivy off. It does frustrate me when people do this. Ivy is not harmful to the trees, but it is ecologically incredibly valuable for wildlife. So people think that they're kind of the suckers that attach the stems to the trees somehow grow into the trees and suck nutrients, but they don't. They're literally just suckers. They're holding on to the outside of the tree. Ivy's got big root systems in the ground, in the soil. It just scrambles up the tree into the canopy to get to the light. And it's an amazing adaptation, amazing evolution going on there. Take a look at those hazel catkins that are going to drive into Ventnor. Hello there, I hope you're enjoying my channel. Just a quick interlude. I've written several books. For instance, Wildlife Watching Around Ventnor. Nice cover there. Bird watching around Ventnor. Don't know if you can see that well in the sun. Bird watching around Ventnor. And even how to write and publish a book on a smartphone. Now this was written on my iPhone Mini 13. The manuscript for this, and then it was edited and formatted and all the rest of it on a smartphone. So here's a book about how to do that. And I've got various other books. There are links to my books in the description below this video, and go and check them out on the online platforms if you wish to do so. And thank you very much.